In a quiet desert village, Layla bint Saad and Qays ibn al-Mulawa grew up as neighbors. As children, they played together, laughed under the shade of palm trees, and shared innocent moments that would later grow into something much deeper. By the time they reached their teenage years, their bond had turned into love, strong, pure, and unbreakable. But their families were not pleased. Layla's father believed love before marriage was shameful, and Qays' family feared that their bond would bring dishonor. Despite this, the two met secretly, exchanging poems and whispers of hope. As the seasons passed, Qays' love for Layla grew so intense that it became impossible to hide. He began to write passionate poems, singing her name to anyone who would listen. "Layla," he would cry in the village square, "the moon itself envies your beauty." This drew the attention of Layla's father, who became furious. He warned Qays to stay away from his daughter, but Qays refused. He could not stop loving her. To protect Layla's honor, her father decided to move the family to another village. On the day they left, Layla watched Qays from the back of a camel, tears streaming down her face. Qays ran after her, calling her name, but the caravan disappeared into the horizon, leaving him alone in the desert. The pain of losing Layla drove Qays to madness. He stopped eating, sleeping, and caring for himself. People began calling him Majnun, meaning madman. He wandered the deserts, reciting poetry about Layla, his voice echoing across the dunes. Despite his madness, Qays' words touched the hearts of many. Travelers passing through the desert spoke of his beautiful verses and his unending love for Layla. Meanwhile, Layla's family settled in their new village. Her father, determined to separate her from Qays forever, arranged for her to marry a wealthy merchant. Layla pleaded with her father, saying, "My heart belongs to Qays, please do not force me into this marriage." But her father would not listen. "A woman must obey her family," he said firmly. Layla's tears fell like rain, but she had no choice. The day of Layla's wedding was a day of mourning for her. While the village celebrated, she felt her heart break into pieces. She could not stop thinking of Qays, her true love. Though she became the merchant's wife, her soul remained bound to Qays, even if the world kept them apart. In the vast emptiness of the desert, Majnun roamed, living like a wild man. His hair grew long, his clothes were torn, and his body was thin. But his mind was filled with memories of Layla. He wrote poems in the sand, only for the wind to carry them away. One day, a group of travelers found him sitting beneath a tree, muttering Layla's name. "Why do you stay here, away from the world?" they asked. Majnun replied, "Because the world without Layla is no world at all." Layla, though trapped in her marriage, found ways to send messages to Majnun. Through trusted servants and travelers, she sent him letters and poems. In these secret notes, she poured out her heart, telling him how much she still loved him. Majnun treasured these messages, carrying them close to his heart. They gave him the strength to endure his suffering. Layla's husband noticed that she seemed distant, lost in thought. He became suspicious and hired spies to watch her. When he discovered the letters Layla had been sending to Majnun, his jealousy turned to rage. He forbade her from writing to Majnun again and kept her under strict watch. One night, under the cover of darkness, Layla escaped her husband's house and rode into the desert. She had to see Majnun, even if it was just once. When they finally met, the sight of each other brought tears to their eyes. They embraced, but they knew their time was short. "My heart has always been yours," Layla whispered. "And mine yours," Majnun replied. But before they could plan their next move, Layla's husband's men found them and dragged her away. When Majnun saw Layla being taken away, he screamed her name until his voice was hoarse. The pain of losing her again was too much. He collapsed in the desert, consumed by grief. News of Majnun's tragic love story reached the ears of the Sultan. Moved by his devotion, the Sultan summoned Majnun to his palace and offered to reunite him with Layla. "I will speak to her father and her husband," the Sultan said. But Majnun refused. Love is not something a sultan can command. Layla and I belong to the heavens now. Back in her husband's house, Layla was treated like a prisoner. Her husband locked her in a room and forbade her from seeing anyone. But even in her loneliness, Layla found comfort in the thought of Majnun's love. Majnun's poems spread far and wide, inspiring people in villages and cities alike. Though he lived in isolation, his words reached places he could never go. His love for Layla became legendary, a symbol of devotion and longing. The stress and heartbreak took a toll on Layla's health. She became weak, her once bright eyes now dim. Her family brought healers, but nothing could cure her. Her heart is broken, one healer said. Only love can heal her. One night, Majnun had a dream of Layla. In the dream, she was calling to him, asking him to come to her. Majnun woke with a sense of urgency. He knew he had to find her before it was too late. Majnun set out on a long journey to Layla's village. He walked through scorching deserts and climbed rocky mountains, driven by the hope of seeing her one last time. When Majnun finally reached Layla, she was lying in bed, frail and weak. Tears streamed down his face as he held her hand. "I have waited my whole life for you," he said. Layla smiled, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "And I for you." Layla passed away in Majnun's arms, her final breath filled with love for him. Consumed by grief, Majnun stayed by her side, refusing to leave. He whispered poetry into the night, his voice growing weaker with each passing hour. Days later, Majnun was found lifeless beside Layla's grave, his face peaceful. The villagers buried him beside her, and their graves became a symbol of eternal love. Their story lived on, reminding generations of the power of love, even in the face of insurmountable odds.